Hello, everyone in A622. This is Dr. McGinty here with a short overview on some things to think about when we're talking about context in program planning. So just thinking about the definition of context and what the authors of our text consider the context to be in program planning, and essentially what it is that they're thinking of anything that involves the human element, dealing with personnel, staff, anything dealing with the organization, and then the wider environment, so the community or the corporation as a whole, and then the society outside of that as well. All of those things involve the context in program planning. Depending on the program that you're planning, the context might change a little bit. As Dr. Dean has said in 2004, the context is the surrounding social, political, economic, and other forces that impact on the instructional design process and the teaching learning transaction. So in the instructional design process and the teaching learning transaction are all parts of creating a program plan. You might not actually get down to creating the exact materials and the instructional design process for your program plan, but you'll be thinking about how you're going to design your programs, how you're going to design the learning events, and what types of factors will be coming into play. The context has a lot to do with how you make your selections. So why is context so important? Just this little picture here I always find to be somewhat amusing is that you can think about two different images of pizza, one laying on the ground here on a manhole cover versus one in a nice plate in a restaurant with a glass of wine and a fireplace. Those show very different settings, very different contexts of that pizza experience. So I think you can see the differences between the two quite clearly, and it does show that context does matter. It matters on how it's going to impact the program planning process. Any difference in setting and the audience, the technology, the pedagogy, and subject matter are going to have an important effect on the program design. These are all contextual factors that will affect your program planning process. Some important things you want to consider when you're planning your program, and why we even talk about context in the first place, that you must have an understanding of that human element, the people within the organization, their relationship to one another and to the organization. These factors all are interrelated in that you want to be successful, you want your programs to be well received, and you want people to value the programs that you're creating. So that's an important piece there, is examining that personal context. You also want to think about the teaching learning transactions that occur within the organization. These transactions occur within educational institutions, businesses, healthcare, community service agencies, government organizations. You want to think about where you're planning your program and think about, what type of organization is this? Is it a community service agency? Am I in a training department in a healthcare organization, or maybe within a government or another type of business, a large insurance company? There's a lot of different organizational structures, and those structures will affect the many aspects, every point of the program planning process. And then think about the idea that each organization is going to have its own culture, its own type of community, its own ways of doing things, its own values of how it views knowledge, and how they view their mission, and how they view achieving their mission, and how those programs that you're trying to plan will fit within their mission. Just want to give you a little bit of an example from my own background. For quite some time, I worked as a caseworker at a place called the OUR Center. OUR stood for Outreach United Resource Center. It was in Longmont, Colorado. And the main idea of this organization was to help the community. They did community support and also education programs surrounding on people being self-sufficient. Their agency in general focused on self-sufficiency, essentially helping people be able to take care of themselves, to be able to understand how to live healthy lives, how to achieve financial stability, and be productive community members. Now, with that being said, what self-sufficiency means to people within the agency and then to people out in the community, it might have two different meanings. And then you also might think about the staff who works within the agency who are responsible for educating the people who come into the Hour Center. They might have different perspectives on how to achieve the mission. So you have, the agency with the mission and vision, but then you also have the staff and the wider community, and you want to make sure that there's somewhat of a congruency, or at least that you understand how other people view the mission and how in the program planning process you're going to be sensitive and aware of those things. You're not going to be able to read everyone's mind and understand exactly what they're getting at, but you want to have a general sense of how people view the organization and the different parts within that. I worked for a while when I was there on creating a problem-solving program because I felt like we often weren't meeting our mission of being self-sufficient. And when I was trying to plan this program, I had to make sure to get the support of the stakeholders, the staff that I was working with, the agency that I worked for, and then the people who were coming into the programs in the community. I wanted to make sure that what I was designing was going to be fitting with their needs. And taking another look at contextual layers, this was another example here. You have a human resource development staff here at the center. Then you might have a services department within an organization. This could be any type of business. This could be a large corporation where you have sort of a training staff or human resources staff. And then you have a department that offers a service within the company, maybe the training department. And then you have the company, which is the larger company as a whole. And then you have the outward community. They might have a view of that company. Is this a good company? Is this something that people respect? Is this, how is the company interacting on all of these different layers? These are all different contextual layers that you want to think of each piece. The people, the wider political, socio-cultural elements that might be going on, and then also the different power dynamics that exist within the company between the management, upper level management, different departments, and how people view each other within that. Power is something that's mentioned in our text as a really essential piece in program planning. This is also something that's somewhat involved in the contextual factors because it is part of the human element. So thinking about power, it becomes apparent when you're trying to set agendas, when you're getting a timeline, when you're thinking about budgets, thinking about who you're going to serve with your program, who's going to make the decisions, how are the resources going to be allocated. I think this piece right here, the resource piece, is a huge power dynamic that goes on often when you're trying to create programs and plan programs. Another factor that is mentioned in our text is choosing who benefits from the program. So who gets to participate? If we have a company culture type program in the training department that we want to roll out, how do we decide, who gets to be a part of that program? Who gets to, take the training first? And how do we roll it out on a larger scale? How do we get buy-in, and how do we get resources to do what we're trying to do? So those are some of the things that you might be thinking about when you're putting your program plan together. Is there money for this? Is there funding? Are there people who might value this? Are there people in power who might not value it? How do you work through those issues? And I think one of the main ways of starting to working through those issues of power and program planning is to just start to recognize where those power dynamics exist. Another aspect that you want to think about is that having good communication. It's really critical to the success of being able to be a successful program planner. You also want to have good negotiation ability. You may not always be able to get exactly every piece of your program planned without having to stop along the way and work with others, because nothing happens in a vacuum. Other people are often involved in organizations and program planning, and so you want to be able to navigate through that with good negotiation skill. Just a few questions to consider as we wrap up is when you're thinking about the context and the different aspects is ask yourself, what is the philosophy of the organization where this program will take place? What is their mission? Do they have a mission and vision? Take a look at, do you have a mission statement or a vision statement? What type of organization is it? And then also think about what the philosophy of the larger community is. Is this a community that really values social support structures, or is it something that thinks people need to be a little bit more independent and pull themselves up by the bootstraps, per se? You also want to think about what resources are available. What do you have to work with, and where can you get resources? And then thinking just in general about how your program is going to be offered. What's the environmental context? What's the ability of people to attend the program that you're planning? So thinking about those questions will help you to discern some of the aspects of the context when you're planning programs. That's all I have for you on this quick little slideshow. I just wanted to give you a few ideas of what goes into context. Thinking about the beginning of this presentation is, thinking back to that human element, the people, the organization, their structures, their mission and vision, and then the wider environment, how people see things from outside. So you want to, look from the outside and look from the inside. Context is pretty simplistic and straightforward on some levels, but it's something you want to, write out and think about so that you understand fully the different forces that are affecting the design of your program.